Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com. And tonight I am particularly pleased to welcome our guest to the show as we delve into another night of fantastic comics that are out there. This one's a big brick of a comic. And what's more, you don't have to crowdfund this one. You can pick this one up straight off of Amazon because it is coming from Scholastic. Please welcome to the show with me, Mr. Jimmy Gownley. Jimmy, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
So for the folks who don't know Jimmy Gownley, tell us a little bit about how you got into comics and some of the things you've done that people might be able to find.
Sure. Well, I mean, comics are baked into my DNA somehow. My earliest memories are my mom teaching me to reading Charles Schulz's Peanuts comic strips. So that was basically how I learned to read. And then something happened clearly in October of 1975, which I just discovered because I'm cleaning out my parents' house and I was looking at my old comic books, and somehow I have like 20 comics from October 1975. So whatever happened there, that was clearly a big moment. And then I just grew up reading them and loving them. And when I was in high school, I decided I wanted to try my hand at making them. So I did. I started my comic book series called Shades of Grey, Comics and Stories. I used that name before, so I don't know what her excuse is. But, oh man, I've never had this happen. The interview is so bad. The interviewer left in the middle of the interview. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You have one of those. That's great.
Right. I got the ice cream cone.
Oh, the ice cream cone. Nice. So on the wall of the print there, you can see that's the cover of the actual comic I drew in high school. Yeah, and then what's that?
I'm going to give myself full screen here just so people can see it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So that was I put that out when I was 15 years old. And in 2014, Scholastic asked me to do a memoir about those times called The Dumbest Idea Ever. And the reason they did that was because prior to that, I worked on a series called Amelia Rules, which ran from 2001 to 2012. And I started self-publishing it. And then eventually it was picked up by Simon & Schuster. And they bought the 4 trade paperbacks I had self-published and commissioned 4 new ones. So it ended up being an 8-volume series.
Now, I'm glad you gave the number on it because I have been looking for like the complete series. I feel like I'm missing some, but then I start counting. I'm like, no, I don't. I've read all of these. I see 8 in some places. I see 10 in others because sometimes Very Ninja Christmas is set up.
Funny stories, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're part of the other ones, or are they?
Yeah, Funny Stories was back when I was still running this tiny little publishing company. It wasn't quite self-publishing, although I was the publisher. But we published a few other things. But we approached Scholastic. I'm like, what can they possibly say? They'll say no, you know. I said, but I wanted to have a book in Scholastic book clubs and book fairs. So I, excuse me, went onto the Scholastic website. I was not published by Scholastic at this point, because I was just self-published. And I'm looking like, submissions, and it's like for book clubs and book fairs. And it's like, we don't want to hear from you. We never want you to send us anything. Please don't. We will say no. Here's our phone number. I thought, well, how serious can they be? So I called up, and I can't remember who answered. I said, my name's Jimmy Gownley. I published this comic book series that I think would be perfect for your book clubs. And they're like, we don't publish comic books. I'm like, right. Okay, I got it. Thank you. So I hung up, gave it 2 weeks, called back. Hi, I'm Jimmy Gownley. I published this graphic novel series. They're like, oh, really? So through that, I was able to finagle getting a meeting with the guy who ran the Scholastic book fairs. And they asked us to custom print a best of Amelia series just for their book clubs and book fairs. And that was what Funny Stories was. And then
so I'm missing it.
Yeah, that's, I think the only thing that's in that is not in anything else was a zero issue that I did for Free Comic Book Day one year, and that's not collected anywhere else. But A Very Ninja Christmas is just the Christmas story, and actually that same zero issue. So those are the two. If you bought one of those books and the main 8, you would have every single Amelia Rules thing.
Well, I noticed that the storytelling approach started to differ a little bit once you got out of the floppies and into the graphic novels, because you were still doing episodic with the comics,
Right.
But once you got to the graphic novel, you could build that larger arc where you didn't have to, first of all, you knew that when a person got 100 pages in, they didn't have to remember 6 months back.
Right.
It was,
Right.
They just read it that same day.
Right.
So your pacing would change up a little bit. And it was good because it was perfect for a graphic novel. I don't think it would have actually worked in floppies if you had told that story and then cut it into 22-page sections and published them out that way.
No, not at all. Although I miss the one thing I do like about the old days with the floppies, I do love writing a short story. I do love that you can come up with a 22-page or a 32-page idea, and just it's one and done. It's self-contained, and I miss that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, you're having a self-contained story in a graphic novel, but it's so much bigger that it's not the same kind of precise little jeweler's work that you get to do when you're writing a single-issue comic book story.
I'm tweeting out our link. I'm not ignoring you.
Oh, no, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I am going to make sure that this is plugged in so we don't get cut off, too, while we're doing this.
Oh, I've had that happen before.
Oh, really?
I picked up my own stream because my power went out. I was using a phone at the time. And what I found out is that because it's done over the web, the stream continues without me.
Oh.
So my hosts were still there, my guests were still there broadcasting like, okay, we'll just talk amongst ourselves.
See, I like that. I love the surreal aspect of these things that happen online. You can never quite account for,
I know. When I first started doing them, it was like, okay, Toastmasters training at the ready here. Let's be professional. Let's do this right. So the first interview you'll find in our catalog is me sitting down with Harlan Ellison. Oh. And I asked my first question, and the first response I get from Harlan Ellison is, well, that's a stupid question.
I watched that video, I must admit. I have. Yeah, Harlan Ellison. Wow. Well, that was a tough pick for your first interview.
Well, my first video interview. I mean, I've done a lot of phone ones, but I'm live now, and now I've learned, just go with it. It's fine. You're just
talking of surreal moments. This literally happened to me once. I was sitting on a couch reading a Harlan Ellison short story collection, and the phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number. And I answered, and he's like, the voice says, "This is Harlan Ellison. May I speak to Jim Gownley?" I'm like, it's not really Harlan Ellison. And he goes, "No, I'm just some guy that goes around calling random people saying they're Harlan Ellison."
That's how you knew it was him.
Like, "Oh, hi, how are you?"
Well, now I've got to know why he was calling.
He was an Amelia reader, which was so bizarre. A friend of mine that I went to college with is a huge Harlan Ellison fan. And this was back in the days of message boards and stuff. And Harlan had a pretty active one on his website with a big community of Harlan Ellison fans. And he's like, "I can't get to San Diego this year, but if anyone's going, can you score me some of these things?" And on the list was Amelia Rules number 7. And my friend Jay is like, "Hey, I'll get you one and I'll get it signed," just kind of buttering up of Harlan. And then, he wrote me a couple times and called me a couple times, and he wrote something for our 5th anniversary issue. It was pretty wild. But yeah, you were walking on eggshells any moment you had any interaction with him because he didn't know.
Yeah, his wife is a delight. Susan, we were in the line. Well, I wasn't in the line. I was behind the table talking to her and setting up the interview time and everything. And they had to cut the line because it was time for him to go somewhere else. So she goes and she puts, steps in between two people, says, the line is going to have to end here. And the guy behind her had no idea who she was. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't wearing I work at the convention badge. So he said, "You have no right and no authority," and blah, 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 blah. So she said, you know what? Points to the people behind him. You, and you. You can stay in the line. Come on up ahead. You don't get to go anywhere. I'm his wife.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, so the line got to go on a little bit longer, but he wasn't going to be part of it. So she was like a badass Mary Poppins.
That's awesome. I've never met. Have you ever seen Masters of Comic Book Art?
I have not seen that one.
It's the greatest movie ever made. It is brilliant. It is a VHS cassette that was circulated in the late 80s, maybe. No, it was late 80s. And it's just interviews with cartoonists. And it's introduced and hosted by Harlan Ellison, who's wearing a members only jacket with a Fantastic Four t-shirt underneath it. It is so rad. It is the greatest thing ever. I must have watched it 50 times, especially because back then it was impossible to find interviews with any of these people, right? Yeah. And it was Kirby, Eisner, Kurtzman, Neil Adams, Wrightson, Dave Sim, Mobius, Art Spiegelman.
Why don't they put this on DVD now?
Who knows? But it's on YouTube. You can watch it right now, and not right now. You can watch it after this is over.
Yeah, everybody stay here. Don't be taking off.
And the highlight is they're all on-camera interviews except for Steve Ditko, who just does a Randian rant for about 10 minutes, not on camera. It's fabulous, but you do get to hear his voice.
Somebody interviewed Steve Ditko once, and they introduced their whole thing by saying how they walked into his studio, and the man was sitting at his artist desk. And he's got an X-Acto knife out, and he's cutting something.
Yeah.
His backing board for what he was cutting was original Spider-Man art.
Yeah.
I was like, because it was just throwaway art to him. Folks, what you can do right now and still stay part of the show is you can click on that link right down there in the description, very first line. And what that will do is that will take you to Amazon, where you can pre-order or order. I don't know what the date actually is on it.
Yeah, pre-order still.
Pre-order Jimmy Gownley's hardcover of 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up, extremely well-done graphic novel. You will not be disappointed. And I have to disclose that is our affiliate link. We'll make 30 cents off of it. Apparently, Jimmy, people will link to Amazon for free. So if you aren't linking to them for free, you have to tell them that it's not for free.
Oh, okay.
But Amazon it's illegal to
people for 30 cents.
Yeah. The FTC will come down hard on me for that. I'll owe them $6,000 for that illegally obtained 30 cents. Last thing I want to do. So you talked about the shades of gray and the dumbest idea ever, and obviously we had all this Amelia Rules, and I told you before we started the show that the interview we did was almost 8 years ago now.
Probably longer now. Longer.
Yeah. I said, we were talking about Amelia Rules there. It is reproduced over at Critical Blast. I kept all my interviews for the trades and brought them over, so it's out there in the archives. We talked all about the last Amelia Rules book and how we could see her growing up through them all and going on into high school years. And then you didn't tell me at any point in that interview that this was the last Amelia Rules book.
Right. It may have been the next to last, actually. Because I would have told you, I think, if it was the last. Because what happened was, I poured every single thing in my being into Amelia for so long. And I felt it improving, just by my own standards. I can't judge what anyone else would think of it. But for me, it was going to a place that was deeper. And the laughs were not better laughs, but they were maybe more, they weren't so simple, and they were mixed with more melancholy. And I really liked that. And then I got to book 7, and it suddenly felt like a burden. And it felt like, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff now I have to keep up in the air, or I have to bring to a conclusion. Yeah. And the one thing I hate is when a really good television show or whatever gets to the point where they just become a soap opera. And there's not even a difference between one episode and the other. It just sort of becomes this big mush. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to take a break, my contract was for 8 volumes. And I thought, well, this would be good, because the next step would be, well, we have to renegotiate the contract for the next 4 books. And then I thought, well, that's going to be one of these situations where they say, well, we'll buy 2 with an option for 2 more, or we'll buy 1 with an option for 1 more. And I didn't want to write to that.
Sure.
You know, Amelia was conceived basically, I think, in 1997. And the farthest thing from my mind was that it would be published by one of the largest publishers in the world. And I didn't want that to influence how her story wrapped up, you know? So I thought, I'm just going to end it at volume 8, do some other stuff, and then, you know, see in the future what happens if I feel compelled to go back and visit her again.
Well, you write, obviously Amelia Rules is an all ages book, and it's all ages in the true sense of all ages, because a lot of times you'll hear, hey, this is an all ages comic book, and it's, you know, the fluffy bears, and using like 2-syllable words the whole way through. No, that is a child's book.
Right.
An all ages book may star children in it, but everyone can read it. Anyone can enjoy reading Amelia Rules, and it speaks on such a high level to the reader. Oh yeah, I ain't done with you yet. I am nowhere near done with you yet. First of all, I want to let people who are watching the video know that if they've never read Amelia Rules or any of Jimmy Gownley's books, they are 95% laughing your ass off at the antics of all the characters and what they're doing, the crazy stuff they get away with, superheroes versus ninjas on, you know, out in the streets of small town USA, running into the store to play Thank God You're Still Open. If you don't know what that is, you need to look that up. And then turning that page and getting sucker punched in a way you did not expect and will never forget. One of the most impacting moments, and this goes to actually using comics as a medium, the way comics only can tell a story. You tell the story of one of her friends whose father is going off to Iraq. Mm-hmm. And she's there telling, you know, how she was at the airport and he's going to be gone for so long. And she said, do you know how long that is? And she counted, said, it's so many months, it's so many days, it's this many minutes, it's this many seconds. She calculated how many seconds it was. And her dad hugs her goodbye, and you turn the page, and there she is just standing alone, says 1001. She's counting the seconds, right? And I'm tearing up just thinking about it now, because it was such a hard-hitting piece right there, that emotional impact that little girl felt that her dad was going to be gone and didn't even know if he was going to come back, but she was counting the very seconds that was, and that's something you could not do that in television. You could not do that in a novel. That's something you can only pull off in a comic book format.
Yeah.
So,
comic books to me are like poetry. I mean, they're as high an art form as you can aspire to. I mean, I think not just comic books, but comics in general. I mean, one of the truly greatest pieces of art of the 20th century is Peanuts. Yep. And that was accessible literally to absolutely everyone. I just read, I don't know how I missed this, but I literally just yesterday read the last 3 or 4 Crazy Cat Sundays, which I had never read for some reason. They are so profoundly moving. And I knew I would never reach those heights. You know, to me, those people are just way, way up there. But I wanted to try. I wanted to see how close I could get to that. And the only way you could do that is by trying to do different things with the art form that you're working on. And then whatever you learn of the form, put as much as yourself into it. Because if you make a formal experiment like that, where it's just a white page with text on it or whatever, if it doesn't also have the emotional component underneath it, it's just a trick. Yeah. So what I like is that moment where you could get those two things to line up together and give someone a sucker punch.
How much do you have to outline something? I mean, I write novels. I write The Destroyer, the Remo Williams stuff since the last time we talked. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm going to get from point A and I'm going to end at point Z. But most of the time I'm just like, this can happen now. Yeah, this can happen now too. Okay, yeah, we'll just branch out here. I'll just shove this in here. But you have different kinds of setups and different payoffs that have to graphically work out. Right. One that springs to mind is going to be When the Past is a Present, that Amelia Rules graphic novel, where early on, she's going through the family album, and you have the family history pictures, and they're done in the comic book style, in the comic strip style of whatever was popular in that year. So you've got Gasoline Alley strips for great great grandpa, and I forget some of the other styles. You had a Peanut strip for her mom.
Doonesbury is in there. On Stage, Mary Perkins or whatever it was. Yeah,
exactly. And it was all, just dialogue of, them having their day, and they were in the picture album. And then later on in the book, not only do you have them all falling down so that you're just getting panels from each one of them repeated, and those panels are telling a story completely different than what you saw before.
right.
But also you're getting, if you look at it and let your eyes kind of relax, they also have this silhouette sort of Amelia's face. All of this came together to form Amelia at this point. I was like, this is some next level Alan Moore stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I love Alan Moore, so I'll take that as a compliment. Yeah, that was one of those things where it's like, I have this concept. Because, well, it was actually, I guess 2 books before that, I had the idea of Tanner was going to show a photo album. Well, they're in a comic book. Why don't we show their old photos? They look like comic strips, which is kind of, it's okay. It's a fine idea, but it's not anything great. And then that idea came along. It merged with Neil Adams' Hidden Head strip, if this is super arcane, but basically it was like a 6-page Sunday comic strip where items in various panels made up the character's head. And if you pulled back far enough, you could see the head. And then it's like, oh, it's a hidden picture. Well, that's cool. I was like, well, can you do a hidden story? And then it was like, well, if I can do a hidden story, can I also make that hidden story contain a hidden picture? And then it was just a matter of doing the mental gymnastics of figuring out how a comic would work and where those would go, writing what you want the last reveal to say, and then retrofitting it back. What's that?
You have to reverse engineer the thing.
Reverse engineer the whole thing. Right, exactly. So that it would then make sense as a linear story leading up to that. And here, so that part, I think, makes me sound smart or crazy, right? But at least, creative. But here's the other part of that. Here's the other part of that story. I was a professional graphic designer at that point for like 12 years. And somehow I didn't know the night before I was sending that to the printer that a CDRW didn't leave the files on your computer when you burned it, right? Yes. So and the burning of the disk, whatever, didn't work. And I accidentally deleted like 19 pages of that book, which was the most insane production thing I'd ever attempted in my life. And I had one day to fix it. And I fixed it all in one day. All 19 pages had to be recolored and
lose entirely.
Yeah.
This dates me. I'm IT, so I've worked with floppy disks before, and I've had them on the table and knocked drinks over.
Yeah.
Sticky. I spilled lemonade on one in college, and I couldn't get it cleaned off. They're like, "What happened to the date?" I said, "I eliminated it."
Well, thank you for pointing that story. That story was always one of my 1 or 2 favorites. I love that story. So thanks for mentioning it. I'm mentioning it because it's things that you can only do in comics. And so many people, they write comics and they're just storyboarding. That's all they're doing. They're just, I've got this character, I've got this IP, I've got to crank it out. They're not, very, very, very few people take advantage of the things that the medium can do that nothing else can do like it. And you're one of the people who have mastered that. And as much as I love that comic strip for what it pulls off technically, it's not as impacting to me as the superheroes pull off that you did, where Reggie has the crush on Super Tanner all throughout his in his imagination. Right. His Aunt Tanner is this all powerful, all capable superhero. Right. And then at the end of that book, when Amelia falls out of a tree and breaks her arm, and he runs to get Tanner, and Tanner can't do anything, and you see all those images that he has of her just falling. It's like, he's coming to realization as his dreams are falling apart.
you could not do that in a movie or anything else. So.
Yeah, and I wish more young people took advantage of the things that a comic can do, because what's cool, it's an interesting time, because it's wild to see what are successful comics, and the wide variety of genre, and all types of different stories that are being told by all different types of people, and that's completely amazing. But it feels to me, as a grouchy old person, that there's a little bit of a loss of the history of how a comic works, or the people who have done more formal experimentation and stuff like that. And it feels like it's more like people go to, videos or whatever, and this is how you draw this, and this is how you draw that. And even the motions are very posed and cal art, and, that's fine. But the entire point is that you can control a whole visual universe that is specific to you. I mean, you can put your own imprint and voice out there, basically unfiltered. So I hope more people take advantage of that kind of stuff. And one of the ways you get excited about that, and one of the ways you start thinking about that, is going back to really old comics and looking at them. I mean, one of the greatest books for any cartoonist to have is the Smithsonian Book of Newspaper Comics. And I mean, when you see what they were doing in 1900 and stuff, it's mind blowing. Yeah. And you look at that and you can't help but be inspired and really want to, make the art form sing.
I've got a huge oversized book of Little Nemo. And it's this beautiful hardcover, and the colors and everything that, of course, they got the Winsor McKay had the advantage of having the entire front page of the funny paper to tell giant block stories in, and now we've cramped it into this. But for me, and this is my grouchy old person rant that I always say often, and I'm going to be on another show tonight, the Matriarchy, Matt Reese's channel, for the old guys show, which is what he calls it, is that for me, it seems like comics these days aren't being written by people who love comics. No. They're not being edited by people who love comics. They're being created by people who keep IPs alive.
Yeah. That's true.
And that's you can tell.
Yeah. You know what? Right. And because partly that has to come from the artist. It's never going to come from the publisher. The publisher is never going to say, boy, that's a really innovative, radical idea. We need to get behind it. It's just not what they do. Not big publishers anyway, Fantagraphics and places like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does feel like I was on a panel a few weeks ago, and people were saying, like, why did you become a cartoonist? And 2 or 3 of them said, well, it seemed like a good job, like a good career to get. I thought, what? I mean, okay, I'm glad that it is now a feasible career, but it's sacred to me. I honestly feel like this is the highest thing I could aspire to be. I always say it's like being a Jedi Knight to me. I just love it with every fiber of my being. And you can tell when those books come out when the person feels that way about it. And you can tell when it's kind of been, calculated. This is the kind of thing that will succeed.
This is secretly my Netflix proposal. Mm-hmm. That's not what brings me to this point. The time of the interview is what brings me to this point, where we want to talk about the latest magnum opus, which I would hold up, but my 13-year-old son has run off with, which is 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up.
You'd think I have a copy too, but it's all the way over there. So
yeah, it's beautiful hardcover, and if people are wondering what it looks like, well, no, it doesn't look like this. This is the kind of my taking the characters off of it and putting them on Abbey Road. That wasn't really nice of me, but I did it anyway.
Oh, I love that. That's as a Beatles fan, that was awesome.
But 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up. Kirby Finn and his friend Raj, and I'm assuming this is a middle school or a high school setting. It's hard to tell sometimes.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, they're cartoons. You don't have the scale to work with.
It's one of those things that I knew exactly what they were. And I also knew that if I mentioned what they were, it would be another hassle that I'd have to argue with an editor or publisher about. So I thought they just go to this school. And the kid can figure out how old they are,
Yeah. one departure that I did notice that you made was that you were a little bit more over the top cartoonish with the adults in the series, specifically Principal Cudgel and his boss.
Right. Yeah. Which is funny. His boss is basically like a floating demonic presence with no feet that just hovers off the ground.
Exactly.
And I got a criticism from someone recently that said that didn't seem very realistic. No, it doesn't.
They're the same people who tell Scott Adams, a cat can't run an HR department, right?
You're like, oh, well, what have I been doing all these years? Yeah. So the thing about the cartooniness of the adults, I think, is I was never satisfied with the way I drew the adults in Amelia. And I felt like to me, it felt not as well drawn, but it felt the same. It had the same stiffness of like the early Disney princes, where it felt like everybody else in these cartoons was like super alive and doing all this stuff, and the prince was, rotoscoped to death and boring. And it felt a little bit like Amelia's dad in particular, and her mom to some degree suffered from that. So I wanted to push it and see if I could go for a little more uber cartoony kind of look.
Yeah, I always just figured it was because, they were adults and they were supposed to, they'd lost that life and imaginative spark of being a child. So it kind of stiffened them up some.
Well, that's exactly right. I didn't want to say it. That's a brilliant idea. So I will claim that was the idea.
Yes. Well, just go with it. I won't say anything. Nobody will know it came from me. But tell us a little bit about Kirby Finn, because I already know it. And if I start introducing him, then you'll have nothing to say.
Kirby Finn, he goes to a prestigious sort of private school in New England, and he sort of comes out of nowhere. All the other kids have grown up together over the years, but Kirby comes out of nowhere one year, and he's an internet celebrity. He is someone who basically was looking at his life, decided, I'm not sure I love the life this is tough to do without giving it all away.
Yes.
Not sure I love the life I have right now, so I'm going to make a persona. I'm going to be that persona online. And that becomes very, very popular. And then the second half of the book is where his reality conflicts with his online persona and what happens and the fallout between him and his friends. And this is all framed by this idea of his video series, The 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up.
Yeah. And he's got some genius ideas, that the resistance that he forms of his friends and what they pull off, how they go on an anti-bully crusade.
Right.
And again, it's hard to talk about without, revealing the genius behind his Machiavellian plans here. When he sends Dwight into a fight, and Dwight's only like about 2.5 feet tall. He's just the tiniest little schooler you've ever seen, up against a bully, and he beats the bully by scaring him. I'm like, okay, I really want to know how he pulled that off. Oh, that's how he pulled that off. It makes total sense. My God, this guy has just got his thumb on the pulse of everything going on.
Well, one of the big inspirations for me was I loved the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and actually, if you look really closely at the crowd scene, at the Nito burrito scene, you can look if you notice any famous faces there. But so I love Ferris Bueller, but I was thinking, you're not born Ferris Bueller. How do you become Ferris Bueller? What's that person like when he's not performing something? And that just became really, really interesting to me. And that's where Kirby came from.
Yeah, Kirby's very much Ferris Bueller because, Ferris would talk to the audience directly a lot in the movie. And Kirby does that by way of his video series,
right.
Telling you this is a reason not to grow up. Here's another reason. And these are interspersed throughout the book. You get all 7 reasons. And I agree with each and every one of them. That's why I chose not to do so. That's why I have action figures and toys and
right.
and again, this is a quote from Harlan Ellison. The whole reason you become an adult and get a job is so you can get the money to buy the toys you couldn't afford when you were a kid.
Right.
But as much as it's Kirby's story, it's also kind of Raj's story.
Yeah. The other thing that was inspirational to me was The Great Gatsby. I love the way The Great Gatsby is not told from Gatsby's point of view. It's told from the point of view of his pal. and who seems not as special or whatever as Gatsby himself is. And I thought that's a really interesting sort of dynamic to pull off that you don't often see in a comic. I always thought the best, I'm not a huge Batman fan by any stretch of the imagination, but the best Batman things are when you're not inside his head, you're seeing him from a different person's perspective, and it has that mystery and has that excitement to it. So I thought, oh, that'd be a really cool way to structure this book, have his friend tell the story. And also because the friend wants to be a writer, have the story be his first foray into being what he's going to be as an adult, a writer.
Exactly. I love when Raj goes to work with his dad, and because his dad, wants him to see what a work life is like, so you can work on getting a career. And he's sitting here, he's like, "Aren't you going to do something?" And his dad's just sitting like this, says, "What do you mean? I've already responded to 7 emails." Oh my God, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, I do this. This is my job. It's all I ever do.
Well, one of my proudest jokes in that book is Raj's dad works at the Riversend Raisin Rehydration Station, making America grapes again.
Yes.
Because I thought, what is the most pointless job you could possibly have in the world? Putting the fluidity back into raisins and turning them back into grapes.
Turning them back into grapes.
Why is he doing this? Who knows?
It reminds me of the boy. This is a throwback. The Flintstones, when Fred was fired once again, and was reading the paper for. I don't know why they called it the newspaper. He didn't have a paper. It was all rock.
It was stone. Yeah.
He was reading the news stone for the classifieds. He's like, wanted person with long tapery fingers to stuff cotton into little bottles, apply Bedrock Hospital. And it was like, and then the next one was like, wanted person with long tapery fingers to pull cotton out of little bottles. Pull it out.
Ooh, yikesy. Yeah, well, that is the Raisin Rehydration Station, in animation.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, where was I going to go? I had something else I was going to talk about the book now, but now I can't remember what it was. There's not a whole lot more I can talk about that book, except that people should get it. Because if I tell you any more, it's a graphic novel, folks. It reads quickly.
Yeah, it does. It's funny. It took like 4.5 years to draw, and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour or whatever to read. Even though I think it's 278 pages or something. It's really long.
It is really long. It's thick.
Yeah, I wanted to do something that was really novelistic and that was really dense, and then it had lots of different layers to it. And for my next thing, I'm kind of going in a very, very different direction, just because it felt like I don't want to spend another 4.5 years. That's not healthy in a lot of ways. So I want the next book to come out much, much faster.
And do you have an idea on what that is yet?
Yeah, I don't have it here, but yes, I have. It's a book called, the working title is Monster, and I have about 130 pages into it. Oh, here it is. And it's actually a graphic novel about dealing with depression. And you can see I have quite a bit of it done, and it's this fantasy story that intersects with some real life stuff, and hopefully it'll be really, really funny and take a lot less time to do than Kirby Finn. But I thought that would be a great challenge, would be to take the least funny topic you can possibly imagine, which is just like clinical depression, and see if you can turn that into a story that's funny, because this is something I've dealt with throughout my whole life, and I've read a lot of stuff about it, and helpful though some of it is, it's not funny. It's very dry. Like, you get depressed reading literature about depression. So I thought, could you make a really funny depression book? So that's what I'm trying.
And it's interesting
because be a better time to do it.
Our COVID year,
right?
Yeah. It's interesting too that so many famous comedians suffered from some form of depression or other mental ill, like alcoholism or stuff like that.
Right.
Look at people like Lou Costello all the way up to Robin Williams. They just had these, okay, I'm off stage now. I can feel horrible.
Right. Well, I think some of this is going to be me sort of freestyling, so we'll see if it goes anywhere. But I think some of it has to do with the fact that the type of person that creates things is very introverted. And the type of person that has to present things to the world has to be extroverted, especially with performers like that, right? Sure. And, so I think that's where that sort of thing gets. I hate to think of the fact that, like somehow mental illness and depression somehow equals creativity, because I don't think that's true. But on the other hand, it does seem to be that there are example after example. I mean, Charles Schultz, Brian Wilson, it's endless. So I wanted to see if I can try to do that, because that looks like a worthy way, to spend this kind of enforced downtime.
Yes. Do you have a contract on this new project?
No, I don't. No, no. I don't want anyone messing with it. This one has to. Here's the part with all those nice things you said about those formal things that I did in Amelia. You'll notice happened in the first 4 books, not the last 4 books. The last 4 were published entirely by Simon & Schuster. The first 4 I did myself. Simon & Schuster eventually published those first 4, but it's not because they wouldn't necessarily want to do it, but they can't understand it until you present it to them. Right. So this entire book is a formal exercise, essentially, where it has 3 levels of people writing comics and people reading comics within them that are all interacting with each other. It's very difficult to explain. So I figured the only way I'm going to be able to explain it is to just do a significant chunk of it. And then I thought, well, I already did 64 pages. Let's see if I can do 128 pages. All right, I did that. Let's see if I could just keep going. And then take it from there,
Okay, so if you're not contracted on it, and this is something that you're doing yourself, are you ever open to the idea of following out this crowdfunding thing that so many people are doing?
I don't think so. I don't think it's for me. I think because I wouldn't. No, I just don't think I can do it. I wouldn't be organized enough, for one thing. I could see myself getting really, really hyped up and promoting it everywhere, and then sort of letting it fall by the wayside. And then if it does get funded, I'll be like 3 years late with the rewards. And I know myself enough to know that I would not be really good at it.
Yeah. You're the person who needs to finish the book first and then crowdfund it. I can tell you that now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I could see that. But even then, and I also feel that at this point, I have enough capital that someone will publish it.
Sure. So I have to know, for my own selfish purposes, are we ever going to see Amelia McBride again?
Yes.
That's too short of an answer, but it's the one I want.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, the time is not right this moment, but not in the fullness of time, as the good book says.
Okay. I'm just telling you. I mean, Stephen King talked about how he didn't get the Dark Tower books. How late they were, and he heard that voice in the back of his head going, "Tick tock, Stephen, tick tock."
Yeah.
Especially after he got hit by a van. So yeah, tick tock, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, I have a plan. There's that, and you'll hear something about it in next year. And it's going to be cool. It's going to be very cool. Okay. Because next year's the 20th anniversary, believe it or not, of Amelia Rules.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, my son just turned 13 2 days ago. I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah, you look up and all that time has gone by. It's absolutely crazy. I think I figured it out. I think Amelia would be 29 or 30 now if she was aged in real time.
Don't do that.
Yeah, no.
Slowly. She's not staying that, she's not Archie Andrews. She's not in high school forever.
Yeah.
She's not in high school at all yet, actually.
Yeah. Well,
but
we'll see.
Maybe she will. But
one of the big secrets, actually, I'll tell you of figuring out how to do it was figuring out Tanner now and figuring out Pajama Man now. And those were 2 things that I felt like as she was aging, either needed to not be as big a focus or to change their purpose. And then it just clicked on me. Oh, that's what it is. You know, they can, and they do have to be as big a part as they were in the original. They just needed to have a different reason for being in it. And once I figured that out, it felt like everything kind of clicked together.
If Pajama Man gets to continue wearing pajamas in high school, that will be epic. He's the yellow kid of the series.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's where that came from. Actually, it was the idea with I wanted to do a wordless character. I wanted to do something. You know, I'm a huge Marx Brothers fan, a huge Harpo Marx fan, and I thought, oh, that'd be great to do that. But then I thought, well, he has these giant glasses, so I've eliminated so much of his emotional range in his face. And then I thought, pajamas, yellow kid. Oh, they used to write the dialogue right on the yellow kid shirt. I thought, oh, well, we'll just use, well, emojis. What they are now is emojis, but they weren't
characters. And you know, for a kid with big glasses and wearing pajamas who said nothing, Pajama Man gets all the girls.
Oh yeah, of course.
He's
you know why? Because he is utterly himself. He is not concerned about putting on anything for anybody. He is nice to everybody. He's chill. Who wouldn't like him?
I hear you. So I don't know if Reggie's ever going to grow up. It will be interesting to see, you know, Reggie in high school still trying to lead Gasp around the neighborhood.
Well, I picture her by 14. Reggie will be like the Dark Knight Returns. Oh hi. Right, he'll be 14, but a grizzled vet, like, you know.
Yes, he'll be writing in his war journal.
Right.
almost like a 14-year-old Rorschach at that point.
Right. The rain on my hoodie is a baptism as I sneak off to the frozen yogurt stand.
A year is too long, Jimmy. I can't wait that long. I will hold fast for more Amelia Rules.
It's gonna be cool. It'll be rad.
All right. So, with that in mind, is there anything else that you're working on, or anything that I haven't touched on with 7 Good Reasons that I could have but was afraid to?
Let's see. Well, I am working on a bunch of other stuff. It feels like it's been so long since my last book, but partly that was because I've been doing a lot of work for Disney, and this is sort of one of the greatest anomalies in my life is that I go to do this freelance stuff for Disney. I've written 2 Tangled graphic novels, 4 Zootopia books, 3 Donald Duck books for like their international market. They have the easiest place to work. They have like no notes. Maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but it's like every idea they go, well, that's great. Really? All right, fabulous. So it's your $1 billion franchise, but I'll do that. Do it, sure.
Yeah. I'll just write. So apparently the writing area is different than the film production area, because we talked with a guy who had been hired on to be like a producer for some of the foreign films that they would develop. And he said he would go to his boss and say, so should I do this or this? And his boss would be like, I wouldn't do anything if I were just sit down, just go collect your check. And then, you know, the idea would eventually die because that's what the idea was meant to do.
Right. Well, you know, you have to be smart about the things that you're asking for too, and the things that you want to do. I mean, you have to be realistic, and you're not going to be like, well, this is my attempt at writing A Heart of Darkness with Donald Duck, you know. But having said that, I was able to make Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck English teacher David Foster Walrus. So, you know.
That's excellent. That's very cool. Somebody did just recently a really cool Frankenstein with the Donald Ducks.
Oh yeah,
it was released as a graphic novel, and it's almost literally word for word Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but it's the ducks.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, I mean, and that's fun because those comics in particular, and you know, Floyd Gottfredson's Mickey Mouse and stuff, those are great comics. Those are in the pantheon, the Karl Barks things and stuff. So it's cool. I'm not surprised that someone would pull that off, because you have to kind of bring something to it if you're respectful of the people that came before you. You know, like, oh, Karl Barks did this. Well, you should at least put that amount of thought and care into it that he did. You know, one of the big thrills of my life was I was out at the Disney like campus a couple of years ago, and the art director's like, that's Floyd Gottfredson's desk. Do you know who he is? I'm like, yeah, I totally know who he is. He did Mickey Mouse for decades. He's like, oh, do you want to sit and draw a picture at Floyd Gottfredson's desk? I'm like, yeah, I really do. I really do.
Yes, that's like, do you want to sit down at the Resolute desk and sign your name on a piece of paper? Yes.
Yeah, I absolutely want to do that. Right.
All right. So what day should people expect to be able to pick up 7 Good Reasons?
November 10th.
November 10th. It's right on the corner, folks.
I think if you liked Amelia, if you liked Dumbest Idea, you'll like this. It is really, really funny, and it's also really, really sad. So, hopefully I did my job. All
right. Well, Jimmy, thank you for coming on the show. Stick around after I close out here.
Right.
Everybody in the chat, appreciate you popping by. We don't have a show without you. I encourage everyone, go ahead and click that link that will take you to Amazon. You want this book added to your collection. If you don't have the collection, Amazon will very helpfully show you all the other things Jimmy has done, and you should click on all of them too. Just put them in your basket. Thank me later. Get them for Christmas, and immerse yourself into this wonderful world of Jimmy's characters. And then, of course, if you need to read something less well done, I couldn't say that because I didn't write these. This is my other writers. Of course, we have links to The Devil You Know, our latest anthology from Critical Blast Publishing. It is Halloween. You could probably still get this if you hurry. But you can get it immediately to your phone if you get the ebook version.
Just do it, people. Come on.
Yeah, 20 stories featuring people's encounters with some guy with contracts. He's a lawyer of some sort. The Devil You Know, 20 great stories. By 20 fresh voices that are really, really good. I would not be a bit surprised, and I can say this even though I published it, I didn't write anything in it. I would not be a bit surprised if one of these wins some kind of an award for best of story at the end of the year.
Nice.
No, I don't have inside information. I just have faith in what my people do. So with that, Jimmy, thanks so much. People in the chat, come back tomorrow night. We'll have another show, and we'll see you then.
Bye, folks.